There's a strange pattern you've probably noticed, but never fully understood. The person who talks the most in the room is rarely the one people truly respect. They may get attention, they may even control the noise, but when it comes to real influence, the kind that makes people listen, pause, and take you seriously, it almost always belongs to someone else, someone quieter, someone who doesn't feel the need to fill every moment with words. Watch closely in any room, any meeting, any gathering. One person speaks endlessly, explaining, proving, convincing, almost begging to be understood. Then there's another person, calm, observing, silent longer than expected. And when they finally speak, the entire atmosphere shifts. People listen differently. They lean in. Their words carry weight, not because they said more, but because they said less. Silence, in a world addicted to noise, has become a form of power. Not the weak, awkward silence of uncertainty, but the controlled silence of someone who doesn't need to prove anything. The kind of silence that makes others question, analyze, and even respect you without fully understanding why. It creates a presence that words alone can never achieve. Most people are taught the opposite. Speak up more, be louder, make yourself heard. But no one tells you the hidden truth. Every unnecessary word chips away at your perceived value. The more you try to explain yourself, the less mysterious you become. And the less mysterious you are, the easier you are to ignore. This video is not about being quiet out of fear. It's not about shrinking yourself or avoiding expression. It's about understanding the psychology behind silence, why it commands respect, why it creates influence, and why those who master it often dominate without ever raising their voice. Because in reality, silence is not the absence of communication, it is a strategy. By the end of this video, you'll start to see silence differently. You'll notice it in powerful people, in leaders, in those who naturally command attention without effort. And more importantly, you'll begin to understand how to use it yourself, not as a weakness, but as something far more dangerous. Controlled presence. Silence speaks directly to the human mind in ways most people don't realize. Long before a single word is processed, people are already forming judgments about you, your confidence, your intelligence, your emotional stability. And strangely enough, the less you say, the more space you give their mind to fill in those gaps. In that space, people often project strength, depth, and control onto you simply because you're not rushing to explain yourself. There is a psychological principle at play here: scarcity. The human brain naturally values what is limited. When something is always available, it loses its importance. Words work the same way. When someone talks constantly, their words become predictable, expected, and eventually ignored. But when someone speaks selectively, their words feel rare, and anything rare automatically feels valuable. Silence also signals something deeper: control. A person who can sit in silence without discomfort is perceived as someone who is in control of themselves and their environment. They are not reacting impulsively. They are not seeking approval. They are observing, processing, choosing their moments carefully. And that level of control is something people instinctively respect, even if they can't explain why. At the same time, silence creates mystery, and the human mind is naturally drawn to what it cannot fully understand. When you don't reveal everything about yourself, people begin to wonder. They analyze your behavior, your expressions, your presence. They try to figure you out. And in doing so, they invest more mental energy into you than they would for someone who has already said everything. There is also a subtle power in being the one who listens more than they speak. When you stay quiet, you gather information. You notice patterns, emotions, intentions that others miss because they are too busy talking. This gives you an advantage, not just socially, but psychologically. You're no longer reacting blindly, you're responding with awareness. And here's the deeper truth most people overlook. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. When you don't rush to fill the space, people become uncomfortable. And in that discomfort, they begin to talk more. They explain more, expose more, and sometimes even contradict themselves. Meanwhile, you remain in control simply by choosing not to speak. This is why silence is not passive. It is not empty. It is an active force, one that shapes perception, controls attention, and quietly shifts power in your favor without a single word being spoken. There is a hidden cost to speaking too much, and most people pay it without realizing. Every time you rush to explain yourself, justify your actions, or fill silence with unnecessary words, you slowly reduce the weight of your presence. It doesn't feel obvious in the moment, but over time, people begin to take you less seriously. Not because you lack intelligence, but because you reveal too much too easily. Over-explaining is often mistaken for clarity, but psychologically, it signals something else. It suggests uncertainty. It tells people that you are trying too hard to be understood, to be accepted, or to be validated. And the moment others sense that need, the balance shifts. You are no longer in control of the interaction, they are. Because now you are speaking to gain approval, not to express authority. Think about everyday situations. In conversations, there's always that one person who cannot stop talking, jumping from point to point, adding more details than necessary, trying to hold attention. At first, people listen, then they tolerate, and eventually they mentally check out. Not because the person has nothing to say, but because nothing they say feels important anymore. When everything is emphasized, nothing stands out. The same pattern appears in arguments. The more someone talks, the more they expose weaknesses in their own position. They repeat themselves, contradict themselves, or reveal emotions they were trying to hide. Meanwhile, the quieter person holds power simply by saying less. They choose their words carefully, and because of that, every statement lands with precision. There is also a deeper psychological effect at play. Familiarity reduces impact. When people hear your voice constantly, it becomes background noise. Your presence no longer feels distinct. But when you speak selectively, people become more attentive. They listen not just to respond, but to understand, because they know you don't speak without reason. This is why saying less is not about holding back. It's about increasing value. When you stop trying to fill every moment with words, you create space for your voice to matter. You begin to speak with intention, not impulse. And in that shift, something changes. People stop hearing you and start listening. Authority is rarely loud. It doesn't need to announce itself, defend itself, or compete for attention. It reveals itself in restraint, in the ability to speak only when necessary, and to remain silent when others feel the urge to prove something. This is why the most respected individuals in any environment are often not the most vocal, but the most controlled. There is a noticeable shift that happens when someone speaks after a period of silence. Their words carry a different kind of weight. People instinctively pause, not because they were told to, but because they sense intention behind what is about to be said. This is the power of delayed response. When you take your time before speaking, you signal that your words are not impulsive. They are chosen, and chosen words are always taken more seriously. Silence also creates a sense of emotional stability. In tense situations, arguments, disagreements, high-pressure moments, the person who remains calm and quiet is perceived as stronger than the one who reacts immediately. Reactivity suggests emotional exposure, but controlled silence suggests discipline. And discipline in the eyes of others often translates to authority. Consider how leaders, negotiators, and high-level thinkers communicate. They don't rush to fill gaps in conversation. They pause, they observe, they let others speak first. And when they finally respond, it is often brief, direct, and impossible to ignore. This is not accidental. It is a reflection of control over emotions, over timing, and over the conversation itself. There is also a subtle dominance in allowing silence to exist without discomfort. Most people fear silence because it feels like losing control of the interaction. They rush to speak just to escape that discomfort. But the person who can sit comfortably in silence sends a completely different message. I am not pressured. I am not reacting. I decide when this conversation moves forward. That alone shifts the power dynamic. And perhaps the most important aspect of silent authority is this. When you don't speak often, people begin to assign importance to everything you say. Even simple statements begin to carry depth because they are not diluted by constant noise. Your voice becomes something people wait for, not something they overlook. In the end, authority is not about how much you say. It is about how much impact your words create. And silence, when used with intention, ensures that when you do speak, it matters. Attraction is not always built on what is shown. It is often built on what is withheld. In a world where people constantly reveal everything about themselves, the one who holds back becomes different. Not distant, not cold, but intriguing. Silence creates that intrigue. It leaves space for imagination, and the human mind is naturally drawn to fill in what it does not fully understand. When you speak less, people begin to notice more. Your expressions, your reactions, your presence. Everything becomes more significant because there are fewer words to distract from it. This subtle shift pulls people in. They start paying closer attention, trying to read between the lines, trying to understand you without being told everything directly. There is also a psychological effect known as projection. When you don't reveal too much about yourself, people begin to project their own assumptions onto you. They imagine your personality, your intentions, even your level of depth. And more often than not, they assign qualities that feel powerful: confidence, intelligence, emotional control, simply because you are not over-explaining or overexposing yourself. In social interactions, this creates a magnetic effect. The more reserved you are with your words, the more others feel the need to engage, to ask questions, to draw you out. They become the ones investing effort into the interaction. And in any dynamic, the person who invests more attention is usually the one who becomes more attached. This applies strongly in relationships. Someone who constantly explains themselves, shares everything instantly, and fills every silence leaves little room for curiosity. But someone who speaks with intention, who allows moments of silence to exist, creates a sense of depth. It suggests there is more beneath the surface, and that sense of more is what keeps people interested. Silence also signals emotional independence. It shows that you are not desperate for attention or validation, and that alone increases attraction. People are naturally drawn to those who seem complete within themselves, those who do not rely on constant interaction to feel secure. Silence, when used correctly, communicates that independence without a single word. In the end, attraction is not just about being seen or heard. It is about being felt. And silence, when combined with presence, creates a feeling that words alone cannot replicate. It leaves an impression that lingers. Long after the conversation is over, understanding silence is one thing. Using it intentionally is something entirely different. Because silence, when used without awareness, can feel awkward, uncertain, even weak. But when used strategically, it becomes a tool, one that shapes conversations, influences perception, and places you in control without forcing anything. The first shift begins with your response time. Most people react instantly. They answer immediately, often without thinking, simply to keep the conversation flowing. But when you pause just for a moment, you create a subtle tension. That pause signals thoughtfulness. It tells people you are processing, not reacting. And in that brief moment of silence, your response gains weight before you even speak. Another powerful use of silence is learning to resist the urge to fill empty space. Silence in conversations makes many people uncomfortable, so they rush to break it. But when you stay composed within that silence, something interesting happens. Others begin to speak more. They reveal more than they intended, trying to fill the gap you refused to close. And in doing so, they give you information, leverage, and insight. Silence also becomes a powerful tool in moments of tension. During disagreements or emotional conversations, the instinct is to defend, explain, or react quickly. But controlled silence disrupts that pattern. Instead of escalating the situation, it forces the other person to confront their own words. It creates a pause in the emotional flow, often shifting the energy of the entire interaction in your favor. There is also strength in selective speech. Not every thought needs to be expressed. Not every moment requires your input. When you begin to choose your words carefully, speaking only when it adds value, you naturally elevate how others perceive you. Your voice becomes deliberate, not habitual. And that distinction alone changes how seriously people take you. But perhaps the most important aspect of strategic silence is comfort. If silence makes you uncomfortable, it will show. People will sense hesitation, not control. True power comes when you are completely at ease without speaking, when your silence feels natural, not forced. That level of comfort signals confidence more clearly than any words ever could. In the end, silence is not about saying nothing. It is about knowing when not to speak. It is about timing, control, and intention. And once you begin to use it deliberately, you'll notice something shift, not just in how others respond to you, but in how you carry yourself in every interaction. Silence is powerful, but only when it is intentional. Used incorrectly, it can create confusion, distance, and even resentment. Because not all silence is perceived as strength. Sometimes it is misunderstood as weakness, avoidance, or emotional disconnection. And when that happens, the very tool meant to give you control can begin to work against you. There is a difference between controlled silence and passive silence. Controlled silence is deliberate. It is calm, aware, and purposeful. Passive silence, on the other hand, often comes from fear, insecurity, or the inability to express oneself. People can sense this difference even if they can't explain it. One commands respect. The other invites misunderstanding. In relationships, silence can easily become damaging when it replaces communication. Withholding words during moments that require clarity or emotional expression can create distance. It can leave others feeling ignored, dismissed, or even manipulated. In these situations, silence no longer feels like strength. It feels like absence. And absence, when prolonged, weakens connection. Silence can also backfire in environments where expression is necessary. In professional settings, for example, remaining silent when your input is needed may be seen as a lack of confidence or competence. There are moments where speaking up is not optional. It is expected. And failing to recognize those moments can cost you opportunities, recognition, and influence. Another risk lies in misinterpretation. When you choose silence, people will try to interpret it. Sometimes they will assume confidence and control. Other times they may assume disinterest, arrogance, or even hostility. This is why silence must be paired with awareness. Awareness of context, timing, and the people you are interacting with. The goal is not to become silent all the time. The goal is to become selective. To understand when silence amplifies your presence and when it creates distance. To know when to hold back and when to step forward. Because true control is not found in saying less, it is found in knowing exactly when your voice is needed. In the end, Silence is a tool, not a personality. It is something you use, not something you hide behind. And like any powerful tool, its impact depends entirely on how well you understand it. In a world where everyone is competing to be heard, the rarest thing you can become is someone who doesn't need to speak to be noticed. That is where real power begins. Not in volume, not in constant expression, but in restraint. In the ability to hold back, to observe, and to speak only when it truly matters. Silence is not emptiness, it is presence without noise. It is the quiet confidence of someone who understands that attention is not something you chase, it is something you command. And when you stop trying to prove yourself through words, something shifts. People begin to watch you more closely. They begin to listen more carefully. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. The truth is simple but not easy to apply. Every unnecessary word weakens impact. Every impulsive response reduces control. But every moment of intentional silence builds something stronger. Respect. The kind of respect that isn't asked for but given. The kind that lingers even after you've left the room. And once you understand this, you start to see it everywhere. In leaders who speak less, but influence more. In individuals who don't compete for attention yet naturally attract it. In those who have mastered something most people never even consider. The discipline to remain silent when others cannot. So the next time you feel the urge to fill the silence, pause. Let the moment breathe. Let others reveal themselves. Let your presence do the work your words no longer need to do. Because in that space, something powerful is happening, whether people realize it or not. If this changed the way you see silence, then you're already beginning to see behavior differently. And that's exactly what this channel is about. Welcome to the Behavior Lab, where we break down the hidden psychology behind everyday actions, the patterns people ignore, and the subtle behaviors that shape power, attraction, and influence in your life. If you want to understand people on a deeper level, not just what they say, but why they act the way they do, then this is where you need to be. Subscribe, stay observant, and start paying attention to what most people miss. Because once you understand behavior, you stop reacting to the world and start controlling how you move within it.